I want to say, just acknowledge my co-author on this, Mark Connar, who some of you heard his presentation in Marquette on the Cornish pump at the mine over in the Marquette Iron Range. Mark is also the driving force for preservation of the only Cornish engine house that's left in North America intact, and you'll see. You'll see a couple of his slides. I know some of you have heard my spiel on Friedensville, and but I'm going to have to show you a couple of slides for those that are not familiar with the area. This is a winter and a spring view of the Cornish Methodist Cemetery in Colesville, Pennsylvania. You can see what it looks like in the winter on your right and in the summer on your left. And so that's what we're going to be talking about today. And for those of you that have never heard of Colesville, and I assume that's everybody, it's a tiny little hamlet 4 miles south of Bethlehem. Bethlehem's off to the north east corner in that far slide. And the cemetery is at this intersection right here. And it's located, it's about maybe 30 by 40 feet in a plot that is totally overgrown, and it's like an inset into this other property where this house is. It was an important thing during the heyday of the Friedensville mining district. So that's what we're going to be talking about here. For those of you that maybe are unfamiliar with this part of the country, the eastern part of Pennsylvania goes back way to the pre-colonial period. And the land that is now in Lehigh County, which is a fairly large county, was originally part of a purchase from William Penn's sons back in the early 1700s. Allentown, Pennsylvania was part of a large land grant by William Allen. He in turn spun off a little bit of land, donated it to the Moravian Church, and that became Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. The settlements in the area were pretty much Welsh, English, German, Pennsylvania Dutch, aka German, and religious persuasions, mostly originally Quaker, Mennonite, Lutheran, and Reformed. And this is a historic Lutheran church in Friedensville, built in 1839. The area became the Friedensville area was not part of the initial industrialization, which took place in the early part of the 1800s when anthracite coal was being mined. The Crane Iron Works was developed to make iron out of anthracite and local iron ore, and then railroads came in around 1855. So Saucon Valley or Saucon Township was largely an agricultural area until zinc was discovered in 1845. And so we're going to be talking about that. Now, here's Colesville over here, right where the pointer is. There isn't much there in 1862, but in 1876, this is the only other map we have from that era. You can see the area has now attracted a lot of population, and that population is largely working at the mine. The largest mine in the area is the Uberoth mine, which is sitting right here. There are 4 other mines in the area that are smaller. We're going to show a picture of one that's down here, the Corell mine, in a minute. But these are the major areas of the zinc mining in Upper Saucon Township. Those of you that heard me talking about Friedensville before will recognize this picture. This is the Uberoth mine with the famous Cornish engine house, the mill, and the mining pit, which went down to about 250 feet or so. The Corell mine over here, you can see it's an open stope mine, and the ore from these 2 mines was hauled over the mountain 4 miles by mule train and ox cart, and it went to the Lehigh Zinc Company smelter here. The dates on these are the dates of these pictures, more or less. And just one other thing, one of the most famous parts of the Friedensville history is the fact that it was where the President pumping engine was located. It's the world's largest single-cylinder stationary steam engine. We have to fill all those caveats on it, but it was to pump water out of the mine. It was designed to have 17,000 gallons a minute pumping, and it was supposed to be to an ultimate depth of 300 feet. This is a Scientific American picture of it here, and a model of it, which has just recently been put on display at the National Museum of Industrial Heritage in Bethlehem. It's part of the old Bethlehem Steel Complex. And so this is an amazing engineering feat, but we're not going to talk about that today. And some of you that watched Nuggets in March, or in May rather, probably heard my colleague Mark Connar talking about it. And I encourage you to go back and look at the YouTube of the Nuggets presentation. You'll see more about the pump and the efforts about restoration. So in getting it, we've known about this cemetery for quite a while, but we're trying to learn about what is the ethnic mix of people here and what are the occupations. And so we took a look at the 1870 census, and those of you that have worked with the census records know that occupations are kind of a dicey thing to deal with. So we broke it down into some arbitrary groups, and we have a mining group, which was about 243 people. We can see with the ethnic mix of these people, this was kind of a surprise to us. We have the English that are Cornish, which we would expect largely, Irish here, largely in mine laboring jobs, and a smattering of others. And since anthracite coal was already going strong in Pennsylvania, we have a pretty substantial number of miners that were born in Pennsylvania. So we're trying to use this information to get a handle on, what were the demographics of the area at the time, and who might we expect to find in the cemetery. I might say that, of course, they don't assign occupations to children, and wives are usually designated as housewives or domestics, or a variety of codes. So the wives are all of the miners are all lumped into this domestic group here. There's also trade groups and laboring groups, which you can't tell whether they're going to be in a miner or not. But because, for instance, a blacksmith could be easily employed at a mine, we have him in the trades group, even though there were plenty of other blacksmiths that were being used by the farmers in the area. So anyway, it's kind of an interesting mix of people in the general area that were employed in the mine. Oops. The chapel for which the cemetery was created was developed in 1863 on land that was donated by the Lehigh Zinc Company, and a local doctor, Henry Clements, donated the cost of building the chapel. And the chapel was staffed by Methodist ministers until 1887. And then it sort of went comatose. It was occasionally used by other denominations. It was occasionally used as Methodist church, but we don't really know exactly when it totally ceased to operate. However, we do know that many of the Cornish immigrants in the area, as this newspaper clipping says, left the area when the mines temporarily closed around 1876. They reopened around 1881. But by then, many of the Cornish miners had gone off to the UP of Michigan or down to Missouri. So that's sort of the background on the cemetery. It basically laid pretty much forgotten and abandoned for about 150 years. So I'm going to now tell you the story of the 6 people who are buried in this cemetery. I'm going to do it really quickly. The first fella is Samuel Adams. He was a Cornish miner, a young Cornish miner. He married Susan in she was from St. Earth, he was from St. Hilary, and she was a bow maiden over there. And they immigrated to the mines here at Friedensville, and in 1869, and in 1872, he fell down a mine shaft. Which is interesting because at the U-Berth mine, they didn't have a mine shaft for workers to go up and down in a cage, but they had a lot of shafts that were put down from the surface for various other things. And the miners all entered and left the mine on ladders. But anyway, he was a fatality. He's the only mining fatality we have in the cemetery. Susan, his wife, remarried. They had no children, but she remarried and had an extensive family. And we are trying to track down all these descendants. So let's go to the next one. This is a very interesting story. Mary Jane Collins, married named Bennett. She was from Camborne originally. Her mother, Mary Ann Skinner Collins, ran a boarding house right next to the cemetery, right next to the original chapel. And we think that she met her husband, Thomas Bennett, when he was a boarder there. He was also from Camborne, and he was a foreman in the Uberoth mine. She died in childbirth, and that's a common theme through this cemetery. But her daughter, Mary Elizabeth, lived. She married the local guy. Their firstborn child became the chief of police in one of the neighborhoods in Bethlehem. So you can see on this one, almost all the stones. Oops, let me go back to that. All the stones have a headstone and a footstone. This is pretty legible, and but it's not attached. It's laying down in the dirt, and that's sort of true of almost all the cemetery stones. The cemetery probably was vandalized at some point, and this is pretty much intact. But I'll show you a couple of other pictures later on that show that it was really in disarray originally. A Boy Scout troop did some cleanup of the cemetery a few years ago and kind of rearranged the stones a little bit, but we know where the graves were located because the bases of the stones are still there in their original position. Okay, here's a great story here. On the tombstone of Sarah Harry, another young lady who died in childbirth or of complications of childbirth, and her daughter, who also died 4 months later after her birth, are buried here. And she notes on her stone that, let's go back, that she is a native of Cornwall. And we think that's actually true, although the census records say she was born in Ireland. But we know that they were married in the old country. They came over here. He was brought in to be an operator of the great pump. And when she died, they had 3 other daughters. The whole family eventually moved up to Providence, Rhode Island, and William, her husband, William Harry, he became an operator at the pump at the waterworks in Providence, Rhode Island. There's a kind of an epilogue to this thing, and William was one of 4 brothers. And I hope we have time to just mention the 4 brothers before we finish up here. I'll come back to that. William Miles, he's sort of our mystery man. I mean, this is a work in progress, this whole study. He was buried after the chapel was closed. We believe he was a Cornish tin miner, married to a lady named Charity Richards. They were both born in Brieg, close to the South Cornish coast. They had 7 children. They emigrated pretty late, 1867, and he and several of his sons worked in iron mines over in the northern part of New Jersey. And later on, after he had died, several of the sons were up in the Upper Peninsula in the Copper Country, and also in Butte, Montana. We have no idea, though, why he is buried in the cemetery. We cannot tie him back to Colesville at all. That may just be a fluke of census, the 10 years between each census. So he's still a work in progress for us. And then we have Mary Jane Stevens Gumma. She's born in Gold Hill, North Carolina. Her father, Martin Stevens, was a fairly early immigrant from Cornwall, from up in the Hale area of Cornwall. And they immigrated in 1842. Martin Stevens worked in Tennessee in copper mining, in gold and lead and zinc mining in North Carolina, and then finally in Pennsylvania. It was another one that died of complications of childbirth, and they had 3 other children, and that survived. And we know pretty much a little bit about their history as well. Just hit the last guy here. This is another one that we're working on currently. Thomas Jackson was listed as a trustee of the original Cornish Methodist Church, and we know he was baptized in Mary Tavy in Devon in 1807. But his parents, we know, were from the Camborne area. The mystery here is that there are 2 other Jackson families, also from Mary Tavy in Devon, that live in the area, but we have not been able to establish a family connection. The Devon Family Historical Society has been working with us to try to establish that, but we're not having very much luck with Thomas Jackson. So those are the stories of the 6 or 7 actual burials in the cemetery. I'll mention one thing about Colesville. We almost lost the whole town by the development of interstate highway up here at Interstate 78. It basically lopped off all this portion of the town. And so there isn't too much left in Colesville. One of the hazards. Here's a few of the historic pictures of houses. This is the Collins house where Mary Jane Bennett was a young lady, and where she may have met her husband, Thomas. This is the Colesville Inn, which was a tavern located in Colesville around in the early 1800s, 1815. This is one of the 4 company houses for the Corel Zinc Mining Company, which operated the Corel mine. Those are now totally gone. And this is across the street from the cemetery is the Catholic Church of the Assumption. They actually own the property at where the cemetery is. And mostly they didn't really realize they owned it until we've discovered that they were the property owners. So I want to mention a few things just about people who helped the cemetery survive and what we're doing now. In 1976, the school attached to the church actually did a small cleanup project in the cemetery. And it sort of went back to nature after that. In 2000, an Eagle Scout did a project kind of cleaning it out and cutting down trees that had grown up in the cemetery. But then nobody did anything more with it. But there is a plaque from the Eagle Scout project. So Mark and I have been worrying about identifying those that are interned there, trying to tell their stories, raise public awareness. We have a Find a Grave page up on the Cornish Methodist Cemetery. And we're continuing our work on descendants, trying to get an organized care for the cemetery, and hopefully we'll at some point be able to get the gravestones repositioned. I want to just go say one other thing, and this is going back to the Harry family. There were 4 brothers that immigrated to the U.S. from Cornwall. Their father was killed in Wheal Vor, which is down in the central coastal area of Cornwall. So at age 36, he was killed. They had 7 children, and these 4 brothers all immigrated to the U.S. Richard Harry immigrated first, 1862, then 2 more in 65, and another one in 60. What does it say up there? 69, yeah. Probably the most famous, we talked about William here, but the most famous is James Harry. James Harry was the superintendent or worked his way up to be the superintendent of the New Albion mine. And he basically is kind of lionized in the history of the New Albion because he was responsible for extending the mine life by by discovering a substantial new ore body, and gave the mercury mine there a new lease on life. Another little interesting story. I mean, all three of these brothers down here worked in Grass Valley originally, and Joseph Harry died in Grass Valley, and he was a very respected guy. We've found out, and so the Empire Mine shut down for the day when he had his funeral, and the whole mining community had this huge funeral procession for when he died. Richard, on the other hand, was due to be the successor to his brother when the brother died in 1905. However, company politics came about, and the New York owners of the New Albion mine at that time sent out a new guy to run the mine. He knew nothing about mining, and so Richard ended up teaching him mining. So that's our story. Let me go on. Acknowledgements here. We've talked a little bit about the students, Boy Scouts. The folks of the Devon family history have been working with us on the Jackson family, and Bill Cornell, who is down in Port Charlotte, Florida, who is a Cornish genealogist, has also been somewhat helpful to us. And thanks to Pat, my faithful Indian companion here, she has been helping us with the Find a Grave website. I just want to mention one other thing. Mark put a plug in for Mark's website here. This is, if you want to know anything at all about Friedensville and its history, the Friedensville Mine Heritage website will tell you pretty much all you need to know. Okay, thank you very much.